right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Serious Angler podcast, powered by our friends over at X2 Power. And as always, I'm your host, Bailey Eichbrett, and today I am riding solo. It's been a long while since it's been a solo show with me. You guys have been used to kind of Andy having some solo shows here in the past couple of months with me traveling all over God green earth. But you guys are stuck with me today, and we are getting on my good buddy, Mr. Josh Bertrand, and we're going to be talking about a juicy topic, and a topic that is very relevant to the time, and especially having seen some smallmouth events coming up. He's got a smallmouth event coming up here in Minnesota on Lake Mille Lacs, so we might dive into a little bit of that. We're going to be talking about kind of when to pick up a hair jig versus a spy bait and vice versa. Josh is one that's very proficient, especially with the spy bait, and one I pick his brain about a lot. So I'm excited to go down that rabbit hole again. But before we get Josh on here, a couple things for you guys is Chasing Hardware. A new episode of that on Be the Fish was uploaded last night. If you guys are listening to this, obviously on a Friday, Thursday night, that was uploaded. That is linked down below if you guys want to go check it out. And for folks who like to use our Omnia fishing code, or if you've not already and you want to, until September 5th, they have bumped our code up to 20% off site-wide. So if you guys want to get 10% or 20% off versus the 10% off until September 5th, your entire order site-wide, head over to Omnia Fishing. You guys can use that using code SERIOUS20. I've linked that down below if you guys want to use it. It'll take you straight there and save you guys a whole bunch of cash. So you can check that out. Yeah, that's basically all the news I have for you folks, because we have a fun week coming up. We're going to have Cooper Gallant on Tuesday Night Live next week. It's going to be a fun live show. We should have Andy on for that if he's not still picking up his new boat. So we're going to be excited to talk to Andy about getting his new boat. But I think without further ado, we'll start talking about the juicy topic here today with our buddy, Mr. Josh Bertrand. What's going on, dude?
What's up, man?
It's been a while.
Has it been a year?
Season at least.
Yeah, maybe 6 months.
But I think we got you on like 3 weeks or something before BPT season started.
Okay. Yeah. Well, dude, hey, twice a year is pretty good. I'm honored, man. That's you guys are doing such a good job with this. And yeah, I heard you mention, that it's just the two of us on this one without Andy, and we'll miss Andy. But I think this is how we started out, right? Like the first podcast I ever did was, that I did with you was just you and I. And we managed to get through it. So we could, we can get, don't hate on Zoom, bro. We're still doing Zoom with ours. So.
Well, I say Zoom like that because I think when we did it with my Zoom, I had horrible internet. So I think we had to like record and like stop and start like 3 times because my thing would crash on us. So, but we're here. We're good. We're having a full episode without any interruptions.
Oh yeah. You're killing it now, man. But yeah, I'm ready. This is going to be awesome.
Heck yeah, dude. Well, speaking on the podcast front, how are things over at the Anglers Happy Hour crew? How are the fellows?
They're good. Yeah, Nick and Rob are just up to the usual. Rob's been fishing a ton. And yeah, if you listen to our podcast, you've noticed we've been a little choppier lately with our schedule. I mean, it's because we've actually been fishing and up to a lot. So Rob's been up to the usual, and Nick's been up to the usual too, fishing a little bit and getting into trouble in the rest of his time, man. So yeah, he's as always, almost every episode he's got a story or two that has us rolling, and that hasn't stopped.
Well, as long as he's getting in trouble on national grounds and not down in Mexico where it seems like he likes to frequent, I think that's good, as long as it's in the States.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And luckily he's been staying in the country lately. So, yeah, it's been nothing too major.
Yeah. Well, I will say I'm looking forward to when you guys have a little bit of downtime and start pumping out some more episodes. I'm a big fan of the boys over at Anglers Happy Hour. And if you have not listened to that show, that is linked down below if you guys want to check that out.
Thank you, man. Very much.
Highly encourage that. Well, dude, let's start diving into it because you guys have had some bomb like BPT events lately. Like, I mean, I'm a little biased because Cayuga is my home waters, and now I'm excited because we can talk about it. Or I texted you good luck before that event, and I was like trying to like hold everything in.
Yeah, don't tell me anything yet. Don't tell me. I would have loved to have talked to you about it before. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, now we can actually talk about it. We don't have to dive into it too deep, but like, dude, I had a feeling that lake was going to get absolutely exposed, and you guys wrecked them. It was so much fun to watch. But dude, what are your takeaways coming out of that event?
Yeah, I learned a lot that week, and overall, I had a decent tournament. I finished 18th out of the 80 guys, so it was a solid tournament, not a home run, but you'll never leave a tournament 18th, too upset most of the time. So it was good. Right. And I'll be honest, going into it, I know Cayuga is good. We've been there a couple times before, and I know it's such a grass lake that grass fisheries, they change constantly, right? So, it's like an ebb and flow of a tide. When the grass is really good, a lot of times a couple good years of fishing will follow. When you have a couple bad grass years, you don't know what's going to, maybe it'll get tougher. So I wasn't sure the state of the grass. I hadn't been there in, it's probably been 6 or 7 years. And I'll be honest, I thought it was going to fish a little small, just because that north end of the lake is where a lot of the fishing usually happens. And our tournaments on BPT, it's good and it's bad, but it stretches over such a long time. Like from the start of the tournament to the last day, it's 6 days. So even though there's only 40 guys on the water at once, guys they're throttling it, man. I mean, they're hitting and they're not saving fish, right? Because there's no point in saving when everything counts over 2. So like,
right.
You don't just pluck 5 good ones and you can't survive off of one spot. You got to have a lot, right? And be able to go to it every day and pound. And you get a day off, but when you're off, there's another guy just throttling your spots, right? So I thought, man, I don't know if this is going to be a great lake for us, because I think by the end it's going to get a lot tougher. And dude, the weights did not suffer at all throughout. I mean, they just kept biting and guys kept figuring it out more, and there were just more fish than we expected. It was amazing.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, actually. I'm curious your opinion on this. So, like, you mentioned how there's certain lakes, especially grass lakes, that'll go through some down years, and how, like, you might see weights drop off a little bit because there might not be as much grass. Do you think that that's just like an age class that died off, or do you think that those fish just changed, and now with forward-facing sonar, we can adjust to when there isn't grass? Because that lake definitely changed in the past few years in terms of grass. Like
it doesn't have. So you're saying that it has less grass now than it did. Yeah. And so, dude, the forward-facing sonar is a big factor. But I would say even in the bigger picture, what I've seen lakes around the country, when they get a lot of grass, the fish have very successful spawns, and they don't all get caught because they're like can hide in the grass. And it's just it's a place for them to be safe. So if you have a couple years of really good grass in a row, the lake is building up. You might not be catching them great, but the actual fish population and size of the fish a lot of times I think it's elevating during that period. And then when whatever happens, maybe you get high water, you get flooding, you get really cold weather, and the grass, maybe they spray. Who knows? Spraying's not a good thing, but for the fishing, but for whatever reason, the grass kind of disappears.
Right.
A lot of times, but the fish are still there because the fish boomed when the grass was thick. So now you have all these extra fish, and they have nowhere to hide. So you're going to smoke them. And I think that might be what's happening. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways to look at it, right? Where it's like, are we adjusting to them, or is it just the multiple different variables? But it's been interesting the past couple of years. I've been talking about it recently. I watched that event very closely. One, just to see where some of my stuff got exposed, but also to like, yeah, right. And we talked with some buddies of like, what they thought of it, and we've kind of been discussing, and like, it's definitely shifted in the past couple of years, especially, I think it was Wheeler that talked about it, where it's almost becoming somewhat of you're approaching these fish not like they're on ledges, but like they're ledge fish, where you have to keep things kind of fresh, but they're always going to bite, but as long as you're keeping it fresh.
Yeah.
We've definitely seen that kind of happen in recent years, where like the lake used to be, you could pick up a topwater and throw it all day long and catch the fire out of them. It sounds like you're being summoned right now.
Do you hear that? Hey, Emma, I'm on a podcast, sweetie. I'll be in a bit, okay? Thank you.
Special
Wow.
guest.
That one easier than I expected. Okay, sorry, man. Continue. I apologize. That's the first of 5 times that's going to happen.
Do not apologize. Special guest is always welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's just been cool to kind of see that like switch. Although I will say it's gonna be interesting because there's a BFL there I think this weekend, and it'll be, while I think you guys made it look very easy in terms of how to catch them, I don't think it's actually as easy as you guys made it look in terms of how you were approaching those fish. So I'm curious to see what those weights are going to look like this weekend, because I don't think really those fish have changed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a midsummer pattern, right? So when will they change, man? When will they start to migrate a little bit?
So I've been starting to. It's going to happen any week now because we're in the end of August. About 2 years ago this time, we got like, it's probably a week after this. It was like the first week of September. We had 2 days that were like low 30s in the mornings. So it's whenever that first summer transition, that first big cold front hits, that's when everything changes. That's when it's like 2 weeks of suck. Like it's
wow.
Awful. Like
really?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, okay, like literally a week or two after this time frame, it took I think 17 pounds to win. Our friend Casey Smith, who actually won the Open on Oneida, I believe won that one with 17 pounds, and I believe second was 13 pounds, and I think in the top 5 there was like 3 fish.
Wow.
I think I was 7th on the co-angler side, and I had 1 fish out of 5.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Like, dude, it was brutal. Like, it was, again, but that could be those fish adjusting, whereas now I think guys like yourself that are proficient with a forward-facing or electronics in general could adapt a little bit easier, whereas the 30-degree mornings made those fish just kind of like, you didn't think there was a fish in the lake anymore. It was kind of one of those things.
That's nuts. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. And I guess just this lake in general, all lakes, you look at lakes a little bit differently with forward facing, but just in general. Yeah. I mean, that the way that they were relating to grass lines and they were kind of grouped up in little pods and stuff like that, it makes total sense, what you're saying. And it's a total different outlook and style of fishing. Like when I had been there in the past, the first time I ever went there, I punched the whole time, and that was not a couple guys caught him flipping or light punching this, last week, but not like the guys did offshore. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think was it Chris and Bobby that were both punching weed mats?
I think Randall did some too. Yeah. I think Randall caught some doing that. A couple guys did. Jonathan Van Dam caught him doing that. I think I found out after, but yeah,
art punching, that doesn't make any sense.
yeah, exactly.
Regardless, it was super fun to watch. It was one where I think like it just goes to show like the North could be just so dumb, especially when you get it right with the weather. Although you guys saw a couple days where like that lake can get rolling and it gets rolling fast.
It was no fun. Yeah, like there were a couple it's a big lake, so you got to get just the right wind direction. But yeah, those afternoon storms are no joke, man. Like we had one almost every day, and a couple of them were actually memorable. Yeah, like we'll be a couple of those that blew in. I'll remember them for a while because they were intense, and it's a big, long lake. It really is.
They're pretty gnarly. Well, dude, so you got one more event left, and that's kind of where I'm going to start transitioning in today's topic, where we're talking about when to pick up a hair jig, when to pick up a SPYBAIT. We're going to kind of dive into both of those techniques to kind of look at similarities, look at differences, and maybe some modifications. We have my surprise guest here.
There we go. Number 2.
We got last event of the season coming up on Mille Lacs, and real fast, kind of look ahead to it. Do you think these 2 techniques will play at all, or do you think it's going to be an offshore, forward-facing sonar, 360 electronics type of deal with these smallmouth?
I think both will play for sure. I mean, there are shallow fish at Mille Lacs, from what I've learned. I've only been there twice, but just when I've learned and researched, there's almost always shallow fish there. Not necessarily like bank related, but just shallow, right? Shallow flats, shallow reefs. And then there's a lot of times, almost always, some fish out in the deep boulders and stuff like that. There's so much good habitat out there in like 15 to 23, 24 feet, that there's a lot of stuff for those fish to get on out there too. So I think you'll see both play big time, just, depending on the weather that we get. We have kind of a short practice. So I actually went up and scouted it, which I haven't done a whole lot since having kids. It slowed me down on taking my pre-practice trips, but it was kind of, I had the time to do it last month. So I went on the way to Cayuga and just put a bunch of time in marking that rock and stuff, so what that's going to allow me to do is I'm going to have the deep rock in my back pocket and not have to practice it very much at all. I might go check and sample it a little bit, but my hope is that I can actually look shallow, and shallow is a relative term, but be looking for the shallower groups most of practice.
Yeah, because if you have that rock marked, that's when we're, someone like yourself that's proficient with electronics, you could easily just graph over it and practice and see if they're there or not, if you want to check it out. But that doesn't take too much time. I think what the other thing too is Mille Lacs is big, but it's not it's kind of like Oneida, where it's not a small lake, but it's not hard. If you have the right weather, at least, it's not hard to get around, I should say. Would you agree?
I agree with the right weather, but so it's one of those lakes that it's when you go to a great lake, there's so much there's so much going on, and it's funny. You look at the map of something like Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan, some of the bays off the lakes, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'll hit that reef, and that reef. It'll be easy. And then you get out there and you realize, dang, this reef that I was just gonna check real quick, I could literally spend 3 days on this reef and not learn it, because it's not learn everything, because it's 3 miles wide, so it's not in the scope of things. It's not that big, right? If a reef is you could break it down in a couple hours. It's not it takes you days. So you can look at different parts of the lake and move around, but it is big enough that when you get wind, and it doesn't take much, even 10 or 15, it makes it really hard to run around. So you can, in practice, you can break stuff down. You can put it on the trailer, drive around here and there. But I think the most important thing in the tournament is going to be finding stuff close together, because you don't just, if it's the lake's basically 20 miles by 20 miles. So you can't, if the wind's blowing at all, you can't just go from one side to the other. When you commit in the tournament, you're committing to that zone for that day, unless you get into a really bad spot.
Right. That makes sense.
It gets rough. And it's real shallow. So it doesn't take much at all to get. You're not going to have 7 footers where you're scared for your life, but very easily can get 2.5, 3 footers to where it's just it's just hard to do everything. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Is Oneida like that?
Yeah. Anything north of, can you see him?
I see his eyes.
Trying to climb the wall. Yeah, I'll tell you this thing. Oneida can get like that if you get an east or west. Anything north or south isn't too bad. That's obviously, when you get a 30 or 40, obviously it's bad. But anything east or west, that's when it kind of gets gnarly. But that general flow of that lake, I believe, is a west or an east to west. So typically the west end, say a Lake Erie, where the east end is typically better because that's the general flow of the lake. That's kind of if you get a west wind, you can kind of almost it. What I'm trying to get at, where it's kind of you want to get the right wind with the general area
with the current.
The
yeah, for sure. Makes total sense.
Yeah, but let's kind of switch gears here. Let's start diving into hair jigs, spy baits. When you're getting out and you're putting the boat in the water and you're looking at conditions, what tells you, hey, I could probably go throw a hair jig and a spy bait today. And also there's a part to that question of, is one of them better in certain conditions than the other? Are conditions different for the two, or are they pretty much the same?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I guess everywhere you go is a little bit different, but I think both of those baits are baits that I think you mentioned earlier. You pick it up when the situation's right. It's not often you can go out there and say, I'm going to go out there and throw a spy bait all day, or I'm going to go out there and throw a hair jig all day. You go out there with intentions of doing whatever, and then when things get right for it, that's when you pick up those two baits. I love fishing both of them, and I fish them quite a bit, but there's sometimes are more efficient ways to catch fish, right? Like when the fish are deeper, drop shot's so efficient because you a lot of times know right where they're at, send that thing down there, boom, it's in their face, they eat it, you catch them. It's real. You're doing that more often than you're making a long cast, slowly dragging it, hoping you bring it by a fish. Like it's like really efficient. And
Right.
when you have shallow fish and they're biting really good, like they're really aggressive, and you can catch them on a spinnerbait or an Alabama rig or a jerkbait, crankbait, you're fishing faster. You got heavier line. So your odds of getting them up into the boat, it just happens. It goes quicker, right? So you start by looking for that. But when you get in the situation that they don't want to bite that, maybe we're talking about those deep fish. Maybe those deep fish pull up off the bottom a little bit. They get a little suspended. Post-frontal conditions. Obviously, the shallow fish, when you don't have the wind, same thing, bluebird skies, like they don't want to eat the spinnerbait. They don't want to eat the crankbait. That is when it's so helpful to be able to have confidence in either a hair jig or a spy bait or both, pick it up and start catching fish that you were not catching in the, previously. And neither are great like search baits. The hair jig, you can fish a little faster than the spy bait, so you can search with them. But again, it really helps you to know where the fish are. Now you don't have to know what rock they're on, but it helps you. You're fishing them slow, so it helps you to know there's fish in this area. You get a couple followers on a jerk bait, they're nipping at your swim bait. It's just not right. And there's fish here. These fish are hard to catch. You need clear water for both of them. That's really, really critical. But if those things start to kind of add up, that's when you want to have that thing tied on in the rod locker, pull it out and start fishing. And it's really common for me to like pull it out and catch one instantly because you're pulling it out at the right time, if that makes sense. Like you pull it out, boom, you get instant recognition that this is the thing to do because like you're not trying to force it in another situation. You're pulling it out because there's
Something's
fish here.
Telling you to.
Yeah, there's a lot of things telling me to do it, and those are the perfect baits to catch difficult fish.
Right. So here's an interesting question. Do you think you see like take a Lake Ontario, take a Mille Lacs, a place where a hair jig or a spy bait can play? I'm not that you can't. I'm sure they play down by you in your part of the country, but predominant thing where folks associate a spy bait or a hair jig is in like smallmouth country. Do you think you see hair jigs more than spy baits for the simple fact of hookup ratio, or is it just people are more used to throwing hair jigs? What do you think is the deal?
That's a good question. I mean, you love having a single hook for sure. Right. And the hookup ratio, probably if you did the math and had a huge sample size, you'd probably find that you might lose a few less with that single hook. But I think maybe some of it's because the hair jig's been around a lot longer. It's very basic, right? It's people have been throwing that thing, even though it's not been talked about for the last 20 years. The real smallmouth gurus have been throwing that thing for 20 plus years, right? Whereas the spy bait's pretty new still. But that's a good question. And people see those little treble hooks on a spy bait, and it scares people away. Number 8 treble hooks in general, we talk about them. But dude, if you've never tried a spy bait for that reason, I think I could maybe change your mind or at least get you to try it, because the way, if you think about the way a fish eats a spy bait compared to the way a fish eats a jerk bait or a topwater, and it works for all species. I've caught them on all species with it. But talking about smallmouth in this case is, think about 4-pound smallmouth. You're ripping a jerk bait through the water real fast, and a 4-pound smallmouth has to come at Mach speed and just slashes at the bait and hooks himself outside the face. Like, your odds of getting that fish in aren't great, right? He didn't get it. He didn't T-bone it, right? He just slashed it. Same with a big topwater. We've had so many smallmouth do cartwheels around our topwaters and not hook up or lose them or whatever. But a spy bait, that thing is slowly just listing through the water, slow as could be. And that fish is able to get behind it and look at it and think about it and eat it, actually eat it, because it's so much smaller. So like, and I don't know about you, Bailey, but like a lot of the smallmouth I catch, they're hooked inside the mouth and well inside the mouth with the spy bait because it's small enough for them to actually eat, compared to other really fast moving treble hook reaction baits, even with bigger hooks, are hooked outside the mouth and got slashed on by that fish. So long answer, I don't lose a lot of fish on a spy bait.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna talk about it here in a little bit, but like I think setup has a big factor in, yeah, and that's one where I'm pretty excited to dive into, because that's one I've been kind of nerding out lately. It's one where you definitely, I think there's a specific trend in setup for a hair jig, but I think it's more crucial for a spy bait versus a hair jig, because I've seen two complete polar opposites and seen both work really well for hair jig. Whereas I've only kind of seen one trend. It's really been the discussion between line, which we'll get into briefly here in a little bit. But you make a good point. Is like the bait's moving a lot slower, whereas a jerk bait, something that's all over the dang place, whereas spy bait's kind of just easing along. Where I can't say, I mean, up on St. Lawrence River, I've seen them, like they come after, they dart away, they come back, and they get a lot of time to look at it, especially because when you have the right setup, you're bombing that thing. Like you're able to hook up at a long distance, and like they slurp that in. We even have a lake around my house here that is kind of a sneaky deal with largemouth, and they eat the spy bait, especially with those suckers, because when they slurp that, it's like you don't see it when you're reeling them in, because
they eat it, dude. It's just like eating a little minnow. Yeah,
right. So that's something that it's a big player. I guess to add on to that question is, when you're out on the water, I mean, do you have, I know you're extremely confident with a spy bait, but are there different telltale signs that you'll see to kind of point you in the direction of a hair jig or a spy bait, like one or the other? Or is it kind of just run with one that you're feeling at the time, and if you're not getting bit, but they're shallow, you might just switch it up to the other?
Yeah, there's like, living down south, I love fishing up north, and I've got a fair amount of experience through tournaments doing it. But it's not like I am on the water up north 100 days a year to be able to like recognize like really subtle situations. One might be better than the other. The hair jig seems to, I'd say colder water, I'm definitely going to lean more towards the hair jig a little bit. Because it is just even that much more subtle and smaller. And I would say like the spy bait, a lot of it depends on what you're trying to match and imitate. So if you're trying to match like perch or something like that, the spy bait works really, really well because it looks like a fish. If you're trying to match an alewife, it looks like a fish. A shad, it looks like a fish. Whereas that hair jig, it imitates other things, and it's not like a fish is like going to see a hair jig swim by their face and say, "No, I'm eating perch today. I don't want to eat that thing." Like they're still going to bite it, but I'd say the forage is part of it, and then gosh, I had one more thing in my long answers. I just start ping ponging all over the place. But like one instance is like a mayfly hatch, that was going on at Mille Lacs when I was there in pre-practice. And I could see that being a great situation to go to the hair jig because it's smaller. But again, you're matching the forage. Like you're matching the forage. Right. It looks more like a mayfly than a spy bait does. So that I'll say the spy bait, there are ways to fish a hair jig deep-ish. But I think a spy bait is pretty efficient. If you're fishing even in, say you're in 40 feet and the fish are suspended in 20, it's not that hard to get a spy bait down there and stay down there. And you could do it with a hair jig, but you just don't see guys doing it. And I don't do that. The hair jig is more of like a true shallow water bait for me, whereas the spy bait, it works better out deep. We do at Berkeley, we designed a shallow water spy bait, a slow sinking spy 70. So it's a nice alternative when you are fishing shallow and you're trying to imitate something a little bit bigger like a perch or a bait fish. You throw that and it's not going to sink down and get into the rocks. But couple different reasons, I guess, when I go from one to the other. But a lot of times they're interchangeable, but there's definitely times when one's better than the other.
Right, that makes sense. So kind of like the same track mind in terms of color. Like for each is just trying to best match the forage, really.
Yeah, and I do a fair amount of hair jig fishing, but I don't do so much where I'm like super dialed on colors with that. I pretty much throw black. Like if I'm doing that, I'm pretty much throwing black, and more often than not, they seem to eat that really well. Whereas the spy bait, I've got a box full of different colors and I'm matching to whatever, just because the paint schemes look so good. You can find one that matches pretty much what you want it to look like. So you got more options.
How many colors of a spy bait do you think you throw? Like, do you have like a 3 different set colors, or is it like, do you go wild like some people do with jerk baits?
I don't go crazy, but I've got like maybe like 6 or 7 that I'll mix up. Stealth, the perch and bluegill colors, I really like those. Stealth perch, stealth bluegill, a few shad / minnow colors, stealth minnow. We've got a couple random ones that since the black hair jig works so well, we designed a black spy bait at Berkeley, and that thing works really good, dude. It really does. Sometimes when the hardest part with smallmouth fishing in clear water is finding them and getting them to see your bait. And if you can do that, they're going to bite. Like if your bait looks natural enough at all, or if your bait's in the water, it's going to get bit. Not always, but sometimes, right? So man, a bass can see a black spy bait from 20 feet away, 30 feet away in clear water. It's going to catch their eye a lot easier, to me.
Have you thrown that, what's the color they have? I can't remember the name, but it's like a pink spy bait.
Yeah, dude, it's funny. I didn't stage this at all, but I literally have this box sitting next to me because it's going in the boat. But I swear I didn't stage this, but this is the pink one right here. Yep. And yeah, pink works really well on smallmouth too. It comes down to like you do eventually just run out of time, right? And you can't throw them all. And I throw the black more than the pink when I'm looking for a gnarly color like that. But we've got another like lime ice type color. I should know the name of this color, but it might even be called lime ice, but it's got chartreuse in it, similar to the pink. Smallmouth loves chartreuse, so those bright colors work really well.
Heck yeah. So total sidebar, but like talking with we both had obviously you more than I would have the opportunity to like talk with Spangler over at Berkeley, and when you hear some of the stories about the color names and how they came up with them, it is hysterical. Like
I love it, man. I crack up at it, and it's a big deal. It's really important, man. You can't have like boring color names. I mean, obviously, like sometimes if the bait has to catch fish, that's the number one thing, and the color has to be a good color. But why wouldn't you have fun with it if you can?
Right. Those boys have some fun.
I'll say this, dude. There's been what was that? It broke up.
Oh, I said those boys definitely have some fun. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, dude, I was gonna say there's been a lot that have been shot down by the legal department over there. For everyone that goes through, there's probably 2 that get shot down. It's like, it's not a good idea to call it this.
I think after spending a decent amount of time with like Spangler, Kyle, and Sexton over there, I can only imagine what gets shut down with that crew.
Dude, yeah. I mean, if we could just get a list. If we could get a list of the reject names, man, we would have a blast reading those on the podcast.
That would be a riot. I wonder if I don't think they'd go for it, but we might be able to kind of like schmooze Sexton and give him a couple drinks and see if he'll get on here and rattle off a few.
He would do it, dude. He would do it. I love him.
We just won't tell Kim. We won't tell Kim.
Be all of our last day associated with the company.
Yeah, right. We all get fired. Oh, that's funny. So, dude, let's start kind of diving into setups here. So, like, we'll kind of go one after another here. And my camera is like being weird. It's kind of like going in and out of focus here. So, apologies for anybody watching on YouTube. Let's kind of start with the hair jig. What's your kind of like when it comes to your mind? You're gonna pick up a hair jig. What are you picking up setup wise from rod, reel, line, leader? If you use leader. All that jazz.
So yeah, Abu's got a rod. It's a 7.2 medium light winch rod, and that winch rod, all those in the winch series, they're composite rods, so they're designed for treble hook baits. Again, we talked about the treble hook stuff, how easily certain fish can spit a bait with treble hooks. So you use a softer, more parabolic rod, and a composite is a good material for that. It's really forgiving. You don't lose very many fish with it. That 7.2 medium light, it's nice and long. You can get a good long cast with it. Very soft, not whippy, but soft. And there's a big difference there, right? Like it's not like a noodle, but it's good. Not like a cartoonish noodle or something like that. Right. But dude, that rod, believe it or not, is great for both. It's great for both the SPYBAIT and the hair jig. And I have like 5 of them. And I just honestly, I changed the setup a little bit as far as the reel and stuff, but in the leader, but that rod is the same for both. So you could pick up one of those rods and it would work for both of those. We have a winch spinning reel. It's a 5.4 to 1 gear ratio. I'm sorry, it's a 4.7 to 1 gear ratio spinning reel. So like the SPYBAIT, you got to fish it so slow. So I love it for the SPYBAIT. Hair jig too, man. It's one of those things that you do good when you fish it slow. So I like that. It helps take some of the thinking out when you're trying to slow down with a bait. You're not thinking, I got to reel this slow, crawl it along. You could be using your eyes and be scanning, looking at your live scope, looking at the water, looking for boulders in the water, through your polarized shades, thinking about where you're going to make your next cast. You're not sitting there telling yourself, fish slow, slow it down, because you've got that slow gear ratio doing it for you. So I love that winch for both. And then the debates, you hear guys like talking about you have to use straight fluorocarbon because it's got a little more stretch than braid. I personally think a long cast is the most important thing here with both. So I'm going to go with whatever line I can cast the furthest. And for me, forever, that was Berkley Nanofill. The Nanofill is going away. So now it's going to be like a Berkley X9 in like 6-pound test. Super light braid, like super light braid. Just again, for castability, it's plenty strong. No matter what leader you're using, that braid is the leader will break before the braid, even with 6-pound test. So again, same line for both, but I'm a firm believer that line can't be super high vis line. So I like a moss green, something that's going to just kind of blend with the water a little bit. You don't want to use like a white or a chartreuse. And I might've even talked about it on this podcast before, but like I'll use that white line if it's a vertical technique, like a drop shot or a wacky rig or something where it's coming down like this, because the bait comes through the strike zone first. The fish see the bait first. Whereas if it's a horizontal presentation, like a swim bait or a SPYBAIT or a hair jig where you make a long cast and that line is coming through the strike zone first and it's a bright neon chartreuse glowing line, I don't know what a fish is thinking, but I'd rather not have that in their face before my bait comes through, right? So, so I'm using a low vis line to about an 8-foot fluorocarbon leader on both. And again, people have all kinds of different opinions on leader lengths and whether you should even be using braid for this at all. But what I like is that knot for my leader to be just outside the spool of the reel. I don't like it in the spool. So I like it to be just outside the spool of the reel, and then however long it needs to be, but it's usually about 8 feet, and then usually about a 6-pound leader, trilene 100% fluorocarbon. Some of the folks that really like fluorocarbon, especially on the hair jig, they think that the density of the line, and there's I could see the thought process. It makes sense. The sinking properties of the line help you keep that thing or get it maybe down to a certain depth or whatever. But for me, this setup has worked really well. Like I've not lost fish. On the SPYBAIT, I set that drag super loose, and I have the light rod, so it's making up for using the braid as far as losing fish go and stuff. And then your hook set's real key too. You can't set the hook. The way the fish will eat a SPYBAIT is they just come up and slurp it, right? So just slowly pull into the fish. Yeah, for sure. You cannot set the hook. You got to just slowly, you let them eat it fully before you pull back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of, what would you compare it to? Kind of like almost like a subtle, like a drop shot lean almost, if anything, or you kind of just reel with
Yeah,
them
even
as they
more.
eat it.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I find myself pulling back on those drop shot fish more than some people probably, but definitely a subtle version of that. Just a slow, just turn your body 90 degrees. Just turn your torso 90 degrees slowly, and then you'll lean into that fish and you'll get them. But it's a sick bite, isn't it, dude? When they come up and you just all you feel in your rod tip is just, ding, and then you
Oh
do
yeah,
that lean and you got them.
man, it's so interesting because there's such similar techniques, and obviously they're different in terms of one's treble hooks, one's single, and it's kind of like one's a hard bait, obviously, and one's hair. Um,
Sure.
but
Yeah,
it's
they
kind of
look
interesting,
totally different.
right? And I think, to me at least, and feel free to disagree here, like the bites are completely different. Like the hair jig is like you just mentioned, where it's a small click, like, and they're on, like you just kind of reel and lean into them. Whereas like the spy bait, like I feel like they clobber that thing, like they eat it like they hate it.
Sometimes they do, for sure, man. Yeah, for sure. Like it's fun when sometimes they'll hit it going the other direction. Like you'll be reeling it, and then all of a sudden your drag is just like there's no
Yeah,
bite. There's just like it's like someone grabbed the end of your line and just pulled it the opposite direction. It's pretty
yeah.
wild.
It's kind of like a downsized version of like when you're in the same scenario, but you're just burning the daylights out of like a 1 ounce spinner bait, and you just get the rod ripped out of your hand. It's kind of like that, but just on a finesse level. That's kind
Sure,
of what I
sure. Yeah,
relate to.
dude.
But
Yeah, yeah. It's a similar situation. Yeah.
right. So
Uh,
are you using that same exact setup for hair jigs and spy baits? Or are you changing
Yeah, I
up the
mean, it's
line at all?
very similar, dude. I'm going to go to a little faster reel on the hair jig. Like I'll use a normal gear ratio reel, 6:2 to 1 Revo 30 spinning reel from Abu. But I will say this, like, I mean, dude, I am lucky to be able to have a lot of rods. So do you. And like, we can get really specific on this. If someone's listening that is like, wants to at least try the technique before getting a rod,
Right.
just you can start with your drop shot rod. Just literally go use your drop shot rod, and it will
Mm-hmm.
do the job. Once you get more into it, and once you want to dive into the technique, that's where it is worth going to that rod specifically designed for it. That winch, in my opinion, it's worth it. But to start out, don't not those spy baits because you don't want to get a specific rod for it. Like just throw it on your drop shot rod. It's light enough. Um, it's it'll do the job.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Um, and really fast, are you throwing 6 pound nano, or are you going a little bit bigger on the nano?
I with nano I was going to 8. Now
Eight.
with the X9 or X5 I go to the 6 in this situation. They're a little bit tougher. You can get away with that.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of like low key, and it's weird. Like there's some people that it seems like they don't want to talk about it. Like there's a lot of nano fans out there that like people just don't talk about it for some reason. And so that being said, like between the nano, we're talking about X9 here too, and that Berkeley spy bait you mentioned. I'll put, if people are interested in getting those, I'll put that down in the description for Omnia because they're all on there. So get the nano while you can before it's gone
Yeah, you guys
because
should have
it's
spoke up
legit.
sooner because now it's gone. I was the only one advocating it. Now, because all you guys were quiet, they're
Yes.
discontinuing it. So
Isn't that an
thanks a
interesting
lot.
trend? Like all the good stuff, people like the people that realize it's like legit, they don't talk about it. And like it seems like the best stuff gets discontinued.
Yeah, and hey, it was I always talked about it. It was the sports car of fishing lines. Like you had to
Yeah.
treat it right, and it would treat you right. But it was less forgiving. Like man, X5 or X9, it's so reliable and easy to use and just consistent. And I get why that's like I love it too. Like I used to be like 80% nano on spinning rods. Now I'm only like 20% because I love the X5 and 9 for so much other stuff. And yet the nano, it could also give people headaches too at times. So I get it. But the performance, when you had it tuned up, like your sports car, when you had it tuned up and taking care of it and treating it right, it was the performance was really good.
Yeah. I'll definitely agree to that. And it's one where you made a great point, and I totally forgot that there. then I was going away. So I'm gonna make an Omnia order here tonight after we get off this call because I need some more. But dude, no, it's a great point. And one thing I want to highlight quick on the hair jig before we kind of dive into like maybe some SPYBAIT mods is there's the 7.2 I totally agree with, and there's definitely, and I think this is more of like a Midwestern vibe, is those guys like a 7.6 light or like a 7.6 medium light with their hair jigs. I think, and feel free to disagree on this as well, like a hair jig you can be a little bit more lenient in terms of what a rod like versus a SPYBAIT, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think with a hair jig, it's all about the cast, right? So if you can get a setup where you can cast it well enough, you're going to be fine, right?
Yeah.
Like
if you get tension,
the SPYBAIT
themselves.
Yeah, just don't pay attention. You're right. With the SPYBAIT, it's about the cast, but it's more about what happens after that fish is hooked, right? Because of the treble hooks and stuff like that. So, and I definitely get the longer the better. But for me, forever, it was what I had, right? Like I didn't have a 7.6, and I like rods to be able to. I like rods that I can do a few different things with. You know what I mean? And the 7.2 is a nice combination where I can throw the SPYBAIT, the hair jig, really teeny tiny crankbaits, teeny topwaters. Like I can do a lot with it. And I'll throw a 7.6 all day long on the bait cast side, but it's just a lot on a spinning rod for me personally. I don't know why, it just feels huge with a spinning reel on it to me. So like everyone's got their things that they like. And, for me, it's just like I said, this may not be the ideal setup for the next guy, but it's worked really well for me.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's one where I was going to give an example is like when we were up at Lake Champlain for the Revo trip, Justin Atkins up there, he prefers a 6.6, like a little dinky rod. I thought he was joking, but he's like,
what
no,
bait?
For the hair jig.
Interesting.
He goes, I can cast this just as far as I can with like a longer rod. And I kind of was like, I was in the boat and he was bombing it and it was working for him. So
nice.
It's like, it's kind of one of those things.
You got the right line and the right cast. Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, are you hooking him that far out with that? Like, it was interesting, but yeah, he made it work and he put me to school on it. But I think it's one thing that just kind of reinforces where there's other factors that are more important than per se length. But I think SPYBAIT, it definitely matters. Can you see?
For sure.
Oh God, this dang cat, dude. Did you see him hanging onto the window? It wasn't all the way
Not
open.
right now.
Oh God, he was like doing pull-ups trying to get up there.
He wants to be on the show so bad.
I think that's what it is. He's putting on a concert behind me here. Gosh, what was I going to say? Yeah, so I'm in the experimental stage of it where I'm kind of trying some things out where like I try to keep an open mind with Justin too. I was like, I'm going to try 6.6. If I like it, I like it, right? If it works, it works.
That's cool.
But like that 7.6, man, I'll tell you, like completely different technique from a spinning rod standpoint. For the life of me now, like I love throwing small swim baits on like football heads, like a quarter, even 3, like up to 3/8, like especially out deep. Even now that I'm getting more comfortable with forward facing sonar, like that's for some reason I can't throw anything under a 7.6. Like that's my jam. I don't know what it is. It's like when you get bit, you don't even have to like set the hook with that long bar rod. I don't know.
Certain techniques, yeah.
Well, because you're not even like doing much with the rod anyways, and you're like you casting a country damn mile with a 7.6. So it's kind of interesting. But I'll report back because I actually intend to be throwing the SPYBAIT this weekend. I'm gonna try it on a 7.6. Let's see what you think.
Cool. Where are you headed this weekend?
I like to go down to the lower on Lake Ontario. I'm gonna try that out if I can get out there if the wind's right. But then I have some all smaller honey holes. I put up a poll on my story to see like for the new YouTube channel I started a couple months ago. Like if people want to go watch snipe fish on Mega Live, or do they want me to like go punch and frog? And I think punch and frog won like 90 to 10%. So it's like
it's a lot more visually pleasing, isn't it?
Yeah,
for
right.
you're getting all the fun by looking at your screen, but other people don't see that.
Yeah, which is actually going to be interesting. I have enough GoPros now where I'm going to have the chesty, I'm going to have the camera behind me, and I have a camera arm that's going to be plugged into watching the forward facing, and I'll line them up so that they I can actually watch a little bit, but I don't know if forward facing and on a kayak is the biggest niche in fishing right now. So it'll be fun to experiment with regardless. But,
Heck yeah.
yeah. But dude, talking about spy baits fast, we're probably going to wrap up here in a few minutes. But what kind of modifications do you make, if any, to your spy baits before you bring them, especially on like a tournament day?
Yeah, as far as mods go, to me, if you've got a good spy bait, you shouldn't have to do too many mods, right? So, like for me, I fish out of the package, the Berkeley Spy. I'm my big choice is, do I throw the slow sink or the fast sink? So if I'm in less than 10 feet of water, I like that slow sink. If I'm in maybe even 8 feet, less than 8 feet of water, I like the slow sink. 8 feet or more, I go to the fast sink. The fast sink falls about a foot a second. So whatever depth you're trying to target, you can count that thing down. If you want to sink it down 10 feet, count to 10 and start reeling it slow, and it'll stay in about 10. And it's a cool tool, man. And I don't want to go all the way back into situations, but there's times that you can use it that you never would have thought of, and it'll catch you extra fish. One story I always tell was, there was just the elite event at Oahe, and everyone just watched that. The last time there was one there was 2018. I fished it, and it was the final day. I had a good tournament. I was in the top 10, and I was catching them on drop shot. And a lot of those drop shot fish just vanished. I was in like 30, 40 feet. A lot of them vanished. And dude, I kept seeing one on both my 2D and my Panoptics. And it was, I'm not kidding, in like 5 to 10 feet over 40. And it was just one fish. And I kept trying to drop the drop shot to it, and it would follow it down like 30 feet and then give up on it.
And then come back up?
Try to keep the drop shot. Yeah, you'd come right back up. And then sometimes I'd drop the drop shot and shake it in his face, suspended. Didn't want to bite it. So I just moved the boat. I backed the boat up because he was relating out off the tip of a point. I backed the boat up like 30, 40, 50 feet. I dig in the rod locker, pull out the bait. And so this is all happening, and I'm not illustrating what's happening. I'm just seeing it happen myself. And Davey Height, who's cool. I love Davey Height,
right?
But he doesn't know that I'm seeing this fish. So he's watching me pull this rod out, and he's literally saying, like, all my buddies after, like, dude, he was like, I don't think this is a good idea, folks. He doesn't really, spy bait's not a good search bait. He's struggling right now, and he doesn't know where they're at. And then, like, as he's saying it, dude, I lean into the fish and catch it. And it's a 4-pounder, and it turned my day around. I ended up having a good rest of the day on that spy bait.
Yeah, take that, baby.
Dude, it was funny. Like the one time that'll ever happen, right? He always calls it right, but he didn't know what I was seeing. Like, if he would have known, he wouldn't have said that. But it was just funny. So like, you got situations like that, but then you've got situations like, dude, I use it at the Tennessee River, man, ledge fishing. Like, and it's not like you pull up to your ledge and you throw your big baits first, a big crankbait, a big worm, big spoon, and you catch the easy ones. But when you've got a school of fish that is like, and eventually you get to your drop shot or your Nico rig and you're catching fish on that. But when those fish have seen everything, like, there's still fish to be caught, you can pull a spy bait out as your last ditch effort, sink it down in the fish, reel it to the school, and almost always catch an extra fish or two on that spy bait, because it's like the most natural, real looking thing you could ever throw down there. So I've caught him at Pickwick with it, Gunnersville, Chickamauga. I catch them largemouth out of schools with it here in Arizona in the summertime. So it's a more versatile bait in situations. You definitely don't want to just, if a guy came on tour and was like, I'm a spy bait specialist, that's all I throw is a spy bait, you would go down a lot. You would be very inconsistent. But if you at least have it in the rod locker or have one in the boat to tie on in the situations, like, it'll catch you extra fish for sure a lot of times.
Dude, that's so cool. Like, and it when you go back to what you were talking about, like backing off that fish and doing the rod locker, that kind of goes way back to the beginning of our show, where you're like, it's one of those things where you pick up one or the other because something goes off in your brain to pick it up, where it goes right back to that, where it's not one of you intend, like, I'm going to go out today and I'm only going to throw a spy bait. No, it's one of those things where you're out there and it's a situation arises and like your mental equation, just pops up and it equals, hey, you need to throw a spy bait right now. And that's kind of exactly what you just alluded to.
Exactly. Yeah. And like once you get to throwing it more, you'll just have tons of those situations where like, it's a big deal at St. Clair and it's when they're not eating the crankbait so well, maybe it's too calm or whatever, the spy bait works really well in that situation. It happens in pre-fish all the time when you're with any bait, right? Like you pull a bait out and you throw it and catch one right away. And then you try to make it into a pattern, but you can't. And you're like, dang, dude, I caught one first cast with a crankbait, but I fished it for another hour, never caught another one. Well, because you pulled the crankbait out because you were going around a wind-blown wing dam and you threw it across because it was the right situation to throw the crankbait and you caught a fish on it because you were supposed to. And then you tried to do it everywhere else when it wasn't the right situation to do it. So it's super situational, the spy bait.
Yeah.
Does that happen to you in practice where you pull a bait out, catch one right away, and you're like, here we go, and then you fish it for an hour and don't get another fish?
Yeah, and then that becomes bringing 17 rods in a kayak, and you get judged for it. But you're like, you throw in 2 the whole day, and then the other ones are like, yeah, I might throw this 3 times today.
At least you're prepared, bro.
Right. I'd rather have it and have like no room than not have it and not be able to catch those fish. But dude, I think there's a lot of sneaky ways you can throw spy bait. Like we throw it here. I think the one last question I'm gonna have for you on this, and I'll get to in a second here, is like we throw it on deep grass lines here, and that was before like I had forward facing, or even before I had side imaging. Like I'd go on 2D and I'd find the grass line on 2D and hope that it's exactly where I'm going to cast, like parallel with it, and try to go along the grass line. That's how you could catch like your nomadic summertime smallmouth here. And that was kind of like the way to catch them. But now that we have forward, I'm super intrigued to take that pattern that I haven't done in a long time, from that sense of these inland lakes. And you'll see how that matches up with forward facing, and could be kind of deadly for when things get tough. But for you, I mean, how much visibility do you need, like at the least, to be picking up a spy bait?
I feel like 3 feet's a pretty good number. Yeah, if you get less than 3 feet, that you typically don't need it. But if you have at least 3, it seems to work really well. Do you agree?
I
like more, but
that's one where I don't know yet. Like I haven't tried throwing it on those dingier, dirtier conditions to see if it would work.
Yeah, and like the Tennessee River situations I was talking about, that's going to be like that 3 feet, and that's like the limit. Yeah. And you're going to try to use a brighter color, something that shows up a little bit better in that case. But you'd like to have like 5 to 10 or even more, but you can definitely catch them in especially in the largemouth situations with like 3.
Gotcha. Do you ever double split ring your spy bait at all? You ever found instances where you'll do that?
I used to do that on jerk baits and everything, and I've gotten away from it. If I was having issues, I would definitely be open to trying it. I just haven't had the issues, and I'm not doing it right now. But it's a good idea. I could definitely see that working.
Yeah, it's one I've been
fish on.
Right, and it's one I've experimented recently. For folks that keep up with the personal YouTube channel on Be the Fish, I've been playing around double split ringing like Chapos or some small topwaters, like the back treble, because it's for 3 episodes. You can see me on the Susquehanna River. Granted, they're river smallmouth. Gosh, he just jumped on me. Where I just couldn't, like, for some reason, it was only the big ones where I couldn't keep them pinned, or they completely miss it every single time. Like to a point where you're getting just depressed because you're seeing these giant smallmouth and they're missing it every single time. Like it was kind of wild. I'll send you some clips after the show.
So did it make a difference for you?
No. Like I went from straight braid and not double split ringing to mono leader and double split ring, and changing completely, like from 3 different brands of treble hooks, from EWG styles to round bends to, like, I was losing my mind. And I think straight up what my conclusion was that Susquehanna River, obviously being this current fishery, you're going down at a decent pace. Whereas the guy that won, a good buddy of mine, you might actually know him, Nolan Miner, won the Susquehanna River. And his topwater fish that he was catching was while he was wade fishing. So he was stationary. He was stationary. He wasn't moving. whereas I was on the kayak still floating downriver with these fish. And I think therefore I wasn't getting as much leverage when I leaned into him as he was where he was stationary. And I think
That makes
that's what it
sense.
was. Yeah.
It's such a unique, like rare style of fishing, or something
Right.
you haven't done as much, right? So yeah, it makes total sense. And maybe so with practice, more than your setup, just practice and your positioning and stuff like that, it would
Yeah.
improve, huh?
Yeah, I think it was like from that. I mean, that specific. I mean, Susquehanna is so unique, but it's one that doing that, I want to experiment with just lakes around here, even Great Lakes, see how that makes a difference. Have two
Sure.
setups that are the same, and when you're on a good bite and it's consistent, to see if there's any differences. Kind of observe how those fish are getting it, and vice versa, to see if it's something that could apply elsewhere. But I think the Susquehanna was just an efficiency thing. I think like if like the Minor brothers were 1 and 2, and like they grew up fishing stuff like that. I think that was one where it's just like from a strategy standpoint, that's really what made a big difference. And he also had like a sneaky JDM bait that like has taken the world by fire now. But
wow.
Yeah. But it was cool stuff. But dude,
cool.
Yeah, I appreciate a lot of the knowledge you're dropping on myself and all the listeners and viewers on hair jigs and spy baits, and I'm sure a bunch of people are gonna have some questions for this one. But looking ahead for the rest of the season, you got Mille Lacs coming up. We kind of dove into that at the beginning of the show. But how are you sitting in points going forward, with Red Crest, and how is that looking for the rest of your season?
Yeah, I'm sitting okay. I'm in by like 25 points right now. So if I can just go have a decent tournament, I would make it. So that's obviously the goal. I mean, but we're not going to fish conservatively for that. It's a good opportunity to try to have a good tournament. So hopefully just have a good tournament to end the year. Don't have to worry about Red Crest. If I make the knockout round, I'll be golden there. So hopefully make that, and then worry about the actual tournament at hand after that, if I can do it. So I'm stoked, man. It'll be good. After that, we've got our team series event in September, and then the U.S. Open after that. So I got 3 more pretty good sized tournaments to fish, and then fish all fall here at home. So I'm stoked about that.
I was looking into that team series the other day, actually. Not to go too deep into it, but I would like to actually have like a legit show about this, because I think it's super intriguing. But like, kind of like, how does that lay out? What's the general format?
It's gonna be really fun, dude. Honestly, and the way they set it up was the top 27 in points from last year are captains. There's 27 teams, and the rest of the field is the draft pool. The captains got to pick 2 guys for their team, and it went in reverse order. So the first in points last year, who was Wheeler, picked last. So and then 27th picked first. And on my team, I've got Andy Morgan and Brandon Coulter. So I figured Andy is like the best shallow water fisherman of all time, right? So I lean towards fishing deeper. And then so I figured he'd be a great pick. He was my first pick. And then we have Brandon Coulter, who's really good at both. He's just a real versatile fisherman. So the way the format works is you are on the water in your own boats. So there's 3 of you, each in your own boat, and you're fishing against 2 other teams who are also 3 boats each. So there's 9 boats on the water at once. It's 2 days and total weight. So like, if you're on my team, say I have you and Andy on my team, and we all catch 30 pounds. We have 90 pounds for the day. And it's 2 days of that cumulative. And then the highest weight total for whoever's team wins, and you make the championship, which will be held in December. What's cool about it, though, is you have headsets in and you're talking to each other live all day like we are now. So we've been talking for an hour, but we've been fishing for an hour. I haven't caught crap, but you've caught 3 on a frog, in this way up this river, and there's lily pads on both sides of the river, and I'm coming up there to join you. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you can be talking to each other the whole time, and they filmed a pilot, and the pilot is on. You can watch it on their app, and it's pretty sick, dude. Like there's not even any commentating because there's so much dialogue between the fishermen. Like you're constantly just spilling all the beans to your partner and vice versa. You know, how deep are you? What kind of grass are you seeing? I'm seeing hydrilla. It looks really good. I just missed a fish out of it. And, so-and-so Talking Heroes right across the creek from me, and he's catching them really good. And it looks like he's throwing a spinnerbait. Maybe if one of you guys wants, pull out a spinnerbait, but the dialogue is crazy. So you learn so much from listening to these guys break it down together right in front of you.
I am so excited to watch this for the pure fact now of like, it's forcing you guys to think out loud, which I think is going to let the viewer like myself nerd out on, because I completely geek out on the mental process, especially for anglers. So that's going to be super cool, especially to hear you guys kind of dive into that. Is it going to be live, or is this kind of one that's?
I wish it was live. Unfortunately not, but they'll be filming them this fall, and they'll be available, I think, starting in December. So we'll have to wait till December, but yeah, hopefully it'll be live in the future. I'd love to see it live. It'll be fun. And you're totally right. Like, we were talking earlier how there was that situation where I was on the water and I was processing all this to myself, but I wasn't saying it out loud. So Davey didn't know it. Right. And that's how you try to talk out loud, but sometimes it's just you, and you're better off just thinking rather than talking. But in this case, you have to talk out loud and tell your guys what you're experiencing.
Yeah. That's going to be so cool. Is it, oh gosh, what was my question? I was just gonna. Oh, do you know where it's gonna be, or is it like the cup events where they take you to the random lake?
It's like the cups, so we won't know what lake, but I know that I'm fishing in Minnesota, so it'll be good fishing anyway.
So you have no idea.
Yeah, dude, it's one of 10,000 lakes. So
it's right. You have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dude, that's awesome! I can't wait to see that. That's gonna be wicked cool, especially because the fishing is gonna be so good too. Like, I think you guys will have a riot.
Exactly.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, dude. And then Red Crest is on Norman, right?
Yeah. Never been there, so hopefully I can make it and check that place out.
Well, heck yeah. Well, when you do make it, we'll get you back on here, and we'll get you back on here. Hopefully coming up in this fall, and then hopefully we'll get you on after you win this team deal. But regardless, we'll have to make this an annual thing. We'll start preluding the next year and recap each year, but we got to get you on more here, dude, because it's always fun, and you unlock the juice for the serious angler fans.
Well, yeah, it's just an honor to come on, man. Always good to hang out, and we talk a lot off the show, but it's always fun to, we never get to talk for an hour, dude. So nice to be able to sit here and chat for an hour. And then the only other plug I wanted to make, since I'm shameless about making plugs, is I also started a YouTube channel like a month ago. And I've got like maybe 7 or 8 videos up there. I just posted one the other day. I caught a 7 and had a couple cool doubles. And then another one where I flipped a 6 and an 8. And I try to share as much information as possible on that. It's the goal of the channel is just to be really informative. So that's just Josh Bertrand Fishing on YouTube. If your listeners want to check out any of the episodes, just no bad reviews, no thumbs down. That's what I always say on the podcast. I don't want any 1-star reviews on the podcast, only positive feedback only. So if you got something we don't want to hear, keep it to yourself.
Keep it to yourself. I love it. That's awesome. Well, dude, I had no idea. I'm going to go and find it after here. I'm going to subscribe to it, and then I will plug it down in the comments or in the comments.
Cool. Thank you.
Show notes. So if you guys are not watching or you guys are not subscribed, make sure you guys go do that. As well as below will be all of your other social medias. So people are not following you and live under a rock, they can go and follow you over there. But you guys are missing out if you're not doing that. But buddy, it's been a lot of fun. I know we're going to talk to you here soon, but safe travels up to Mille Lacs. And I can't wait to watch that event. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you, man. Yeah, dude. You too. I know you got a busy stretch coming up, so I'll talk to you real soon, dude. Thanks for having me on.
All right, boss. Well, I don't have anything for the viewers to wrap things up beyond we'll see you guys. We have Business from the Bass Boat coming up on Monday, and then Tuesday Night Live we have with Cooper Gallant for Tuesday Night Live. So we'll see you guys then. But Josh, we're going to sign us out here. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right,
Take care,
man.
folks.
See you later.
Peace.